Hi everyone, it's Zong. Thank you so much for joining me today in conjunction with ParentChild Plus, an organization that I've been supporting for the past few months. ParentChild Plus, if you don't know, is a national school readiness nonprofit that works with young children and families in low-income communities. I'm also excited to welcome Kat Zhang, who is the author of Amy Wu and the Perfect Bao.
Hi,
Hi, Kat.
thanks so
She'll
much
be,
for having me.
yeah, of course. Thank you so much for coming on. So you'll be reading this amazing book. We love it so much. Read it to Cece,
Yes.
and yeah, we just love yeah, you guys will find out more when she reads the story a little bit later, which I'm so excited for you guys to see. But I'd love to just open up the conversation about food and culture, have you introduce yourself to everyone here, and we're just gonna have a really fun time.
I'm excited.
So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, the book, and just your thoughts on how food bridges communities and our culture together?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, my name is Kat Zhang. I've been writing since I was really young. Picture books are kind of a new thing to me. Amy Wu and the Perfect Bao was my first picture book. And then I was really excited to be able to continue Amy's stories. So now we have like Amy Wu and the Patrick Dragon, and Amy Wu and the Warm Welcome is coming out next year. And I'm really hopeful that there will be even more Amy Wu stories after that. It's so awesome to me that there gets to be this like Chinese American protagonist in a picture book, which I feel like I very rarely ever saw when I was reading picture books, and it's
Absolutely.
so cool to have that now. And I was really happy to be able to start. Not every single one of Amy's stories is connected with food, but
Mhm.
she loves food as I love food. I think it's so great to be able to have her share her culture and her love for her culture through this because growing up, my parents were immigrants to the United States a couple of years before I was born. And
Mhm.
we grew up pretty much like entirely eating Chinese food at home.
Yeah.
And being able to cook with my parents and was a big deal to me. They were like busy and I was busy with school, and for us, especially when I was younger, like cooking and eating together was the time to like connect as a family. And I definitely always like I felt more Chinese because I eat Chinese food, especially because I grew up in a place that didn't have like a lot of other Chinese Americans around.
Right.
It was such a way for me to like connect to my heritage. So I was really glad to be able to have that in Amy's stories as well.
I love it. I mean, I grew up with a very similar background. I grew up Vietnamese American, and we only had Vietnamese food, but I love that now with the world being so open to more cuisines and just Asian food in general is becoming a lot more popular. We get to try those different cuisines that we didn't necessarily grow up eating. And I love that I can show my daughter, like the process of making bao and the process of cooking. I mean, that's what I do, but to learn about other dishes that I'm not, an expert at, and seeing the struggles and seeing how it takes a lot of practice, and just the story from this book and the educational means from it, just it kind of connects the kids together with the food and culture and all that stuff too. So so tell me how you have been involved with Parent Child Plus.
Yeah, so this is like one of my first events with them. And then we have another event coming up that I'm really excited about that's going to be a group of, Asian American picture book authors. And we're going to come together and talk about, how important it is for us to have like Asian representation in children's literature. I
Mhm.
think it's so great to, support early childhood literacy. Reading for me was so important when I was growing up. It was, my way of exploring the world, exploring, the lives of people who are different from me. And I think it taught me so much about empathy and kindness and open-mindedness toward other people, and fostered this like early love of learning and
Mhm.
exploration that I think is just really, really important.
And
And
I think that's so important, especially right now with the current climate about Asian and everything that our culture is enduring right now. And so having these voices and just these conversations, I think will really open people's mind to, what we're experiencing, but also just having a little more empathy in general towards all cultures. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I love
Um,
how like I've been able to do, when I do school visits with Amy Wu and, her books,
mhm,
obviously not every kid is, Asian American or Chinese American, and not a lot of the kids who read the books like don't even know what Bao is. But
mhm.
they're still able to connect with it because it's, making Bao in itself might not be like a universal story, but cooking with your family, like most kids or a lot of kids can identify with that. And I'll go to schools and the teachers talk about like, oh, like, it really incited this conversation where people talk about like, oh, like I don't make bao with my family, but I make like samosas or I make empanadas or I make Christmas cookies every year. And it's like a big
Yeah.
deal. And so everybody is able to connect with Amy, but at the same time, like realize that, even though everybody's culture is different and that's great, like there are these common themes that like everybody has just by the fact of being human. And I love that kids are able to sort of see that as well.
Yeah. And I also love that you mentioned earlier that growing up, we never saw ourselves in books. I is there kind of like a feedback? Do you hear?
Only a tiny bit.
Okay. So let me move this real quick. But I love that you mentioned how growing up we never saw ourselves in books, and I remember I really connected with Babysitters Club because Claudia was half Japanese or something like that. But I love that there's a lot more diversity in books
Mhm.
these days. That kids, especially with my kids being multicultural, they could see there's so many different cultures and so many different types of protagonists in books these days that they can relate to. So that was really great to see, and I think really important to have that these days too. So thank you for writing something like this.
Yeah. It's definitely really important to me. I think, it's something that's definitely something I noticed growing up. And I was like a big, like, for example, like I love fantasy and science fiction as a kid. And there were books with like Asian American and Chinese American protagonists, but I feel like at least the ones that I was exposed to in like grade school, a lot of them that if there was like an Asian American protagonist, the book was focused heavily around like some struggle they went through because they were like Asian American, or they're like a historic novel about the historical troubles of being Asian American or something like that. And I think those are also like obviously really important books and tackle like important topics, but I think it's good to have like balance and to have books in which the main character is Asian American, but they just like go on an adventure, or they
Mhm.
go on the same adventures that their counterparts who are Caucasian like go on, and don't have to always have their stories focus entirely around their culture, and especially like the struggles with their culture. And I want
Mhm.
like books that just celebrate the joys of being having this unique culture and their experiences.
Absolutely. So do you want to read this first, or should we open it for Q&A?
I guess we could read first, let people know that they are open to submit questions, um,
Yeah.
and think whatever you guys think about, we'll be happy to talk about and go ahead and answer. But yeah, to give people a little time to get their thoughts together and get their questions, and we can read the book.
Perfect. And just for everyone joining today, if you purchased a ticket, we will be announcing the giveaway tomorrow morning on ParentChild Plus's Instagram. And let's see here. You guys can submit any questions on the comments. And if you guys are interested in making any donations to ParentChild Plus, I believe Adrienne will put in a link in the comment box so you can see it. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started with the book.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone whose kiddos wanted to participate have brought their kiddos around. If not, go get them now. So we will be reading from Amy Wu and the Perfect Bao.
And I'll just flip the book for you. I'll show the pictures.
No seven pictures. I will go ahead and focus like on reading.
Yes.
So we will start. Amy Wu and the Perfect Bao. And the illustrator is Charlene Chua, who is amazing. She was actually the one who came up with Amy's kitty, who wasn't in any of my drafts of the book, and now it's like one of my favorite parts of the book. Amy's kitty, I thought it was really important that, it's in order to have the book reach people who may not know what a bao was or even how to pronounce it, that there was an introduction somewhere that let people know how to read it, so that when they read it aloud to their kid, they knew how to say it. So that's why we had that little introduction about how bao is pronounced.
Super cute.
So first page. Amy can do a lot of things. She can brush her teeth. She can tie her shoe. She can even do both at once. Sort of. But there's one thing Amy cannot do. She cannot make the perfect bao.
Okay, I'm gonna have to peek over.
No worries. Okay. Sometimes they come out too small. Sometimes they come out too big. Sometimes she adds too much filling. Sometimes not enough. And sometimes they fall apart before they reach her mouth. Amy's mom and dad make perfect bao. So does her grandma. Their bao are soft and fluffy and so, so delicious. Amy could eat them all day. Sometimes she does. Today, Amy is going to do it. She is going to make the world's most perfect bao. Bao making is an all-day event. Amy's dad starts in the morning mixing together the ingredients for the dough. Then it's time to knead. He pushes the dough. He punches the dough. Amy gives it a try too. They leave the dough to rise. Amy keeps an eye on it just in case. It grows bigger and bigger and even bigger.
That's my favorite. I do that too.
Amy's dad squishes the dough down just in time. He rolls it into a log and cuts it into pieces. Meanwhile, Amy's mom seasons meat for the filling. Everyone gathers around the table and rolls up their sleeves. It's time to get to work. Amy's first bao turns out a little funny. So does the second. It's hard to know how much filling to add. Too little and the bao is sad and empty. Too much and oops. It's also hard to pinch the bao shut just right. Pinch, pinch, pinch. Amy watches her mom make a perfect bao. She watches her dad make a perfect bao, and her grandma too. They all try to teach her. Roll out the dough like this, says Amy's dad. Use just enough filling, says Amy's mom. Pinch, 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 says Amy's grandma. But Amy's bao just aren't the same. They are too empty or too fat. They have holes in them. They leak. Maybe today won't be the day after all. Maybe Amy just can't make a perfect bao. Then Amy has an idea. The pieces of dough were cut for grown-up hands, but Amy's hands are very small. She whispers her idea into her grandma's ear. Amy's grandma cuts each piece of dough into 2 smaller pieces, Amy-sized pieces. Now they fit perfectly in Amy's palms. Carefully, Amy rolls the dough so it's thicker on the inside and thinner at the edges. She adds just the right amount of filling. She pinches it shut. And there it is, Amy's perfect bao. She makes another and another and even more after that. He is a bao making master. Soon, all the dough and filling are gone. Everyone is tired, but they're not done yet. Amy's grandma boils a big pot of water. It's time to steam the bao. Amy keeps an eye on the steamer, just in case. All of her perfect bao, and all of the imperfect ones too, are snug inside. The bao are done. Amy's mom lifts the lid off the steamer. Whoosh! Out comes a puff of steam. Amy can't see anything at all. The steam clears. There are Amy's perfect bao. They are not too small. They are not too big. They have just the right amount of filling, and they do not leak. They are soft and fluffy and so, so delicious. Amy eats one, then another. Then she eats one of the not so perfect bao. And you know what? It tastes just as good. And I always love the selection at the end with Amy sharing the bao with all of her friends at school. And then at the end of that is the recipe, which is based a lot on the recipe that I use now. It's probably a little bit different, honestly, than the one that I made with my parents growing up. But I've had a lot of time to sort of like tweak it and try different recipes online and be like, oh, like if you add milk, like this is what happens. To be honest, when I was growing up, my parents like never use recipes, right? Like even making bao, you just like slosh water in and you like add yeast and then like you just like add the flour until it's the right consistency, and like every time was like different.
Yeah. I always ask my mom about family recipes and she's like, I don't know, just add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that, but you have to taste it. They always go by taste. So that's actually how I learned how to cook too. So
yeah. So I feel like for me, like I'm much more like when I cook, I feel like it's more like, oh, like you do it until like it seems right. But for me, like baking and like, like bread products are more like precise. So I like to, especially like things that you can't taste until they're done. Like you can't taste the dough until it's done. I guess you can taste the filling before it's done. But so yeah, I'm proud of the dough, which is something that like I was able to throw together. But the filling, I think is cool. I really like shrimp and the pork to keep it together. But I've definitely had people be like, oh, like we're vegetarian or we don't eat seafood or we don't eat like pork. And the nice thing I think about bao is like some of my favorite bao are actually like sweet bao, and so I'm always like, oh, just put like red bean paste in it. Like you can get that from like your nearest like Asian market or whatever, and it'll be just as good.
Baos are just delicious in general. Even just the plain ones, dip it with a little bit of soy sauce, and it's so good. Anyways, thank you so much for reading this story. What I really love about it, it's not just that it's centered around food, but there's problem solving and perseverance from Amy to think about, why hers wasn't working. And I love that example for kids to just keep on being curious and try different things. So that was really awesome. So Sarah has a question for you. Kat, what are the most common questions you get when you read this on school visits?
To be honest, I think a lot of people ask about Amy's kitty. They all love her kitty and they want to know, like, oh, is the kitty going to be in other books? Like, do you have a cat? Which sadly I don't because I'm allergic to cats, but I wish I did. I think a lot of kids, ask about my experiences making bao when I was little. They always want to know, like, oh, like, is Amy based on you? Like, is this based on a real story? And I love talking about my experiences making bao. And we made bao sometimes we made probably like mantou, which are like kind of like the bao with no filling, a
Mhm.
lot more when I was younger. And I remember just like getting a little piece of dough to like play with, and then I always like sneak it into the steamer, and it would come out all like misshapen. And then yeah, like being frustrated that I wasn't able to, like make them as well as my parents. And also just making dumplings too. I feel like growing up, like a dumpling party was like a thing, right? Like everybody would like
Right.
come over and
And they
everybody
would look so fast, just pinching everything, and they would, yeah. They
the
would, like
grown-ups would like talk and like make dumplings like while they talk, and all the kids would just like play around.
but those are such wonderful memories that even today you remember, and, it's a celebration.
Yeah,
So
again, I think it's like such an important like how like food and community and family and culture were also like tightly entwined.
right. Amazing. Well, do you guys have more, questions for us? Whitney, I'm so glad your three-year-old loved the cat, and I also love that there's a recipe at the end. We'll definitely try your perfected bao recipe. Um, awesome. There's not anything else. I guess thank you so much for reading the book to us, Kat. We're so excited to check out the other series. What are the other books around Amy again?
So I think I have, there you go. So the second one is Amy Wu and the Patchwork Dragon, which I also love, and it's about how Amy's teacher reads her class a book about like Western dragons.
Mhm.
And they learn all about, like Western dragons and how they hoard treasure and they fight
Yeah.
knights. And the teacher asks them to make a dragon that, is unique to them. And Amy draws like an Eastern dragon, but her friends are kind of hesitant about it because they've never been exposed to Eastern dragons.
Mhm.
And Amy gets sort of, disappointed that, nobody recognizes this as a dragon. She becomes sort of self-conscious about it.
Mhm.
And she's sad that she can't share this with her friends. But when then she goes home with her friends, and her grandma tells them stories about Eastern dragons, and let's see if I can focus in. They're like really awed by all of the stories. And Amy is able to, share her family sort of dragon costume with them. And then when she and her family work together to make a dragon that is completely unique to her, and it kind of
Mhm.
combines a little bit of, Eastern culture and some Western cultures, just like Amy. And she is able to make a dragon that is uniquely hers.
I
Um,
love that.
I really like it. I love how it kind of shows that, so many bicultural children have, this really strong familial, like cultural experience. But, obviously growing up in the US, like, you're American, right? Like you're exposed to all of these Western influences too, and how that, is combined and it makes something like really unique to every kid. We don't have a recipe in this one, but we have like dragon activity in the back, and I'm glad that's something we were able to continue through all of the Amy Wu books, because Amy is such a creative, crafty kid. So I love that her books like always have some sort of activity for the kids at the end of them.
That's awesome. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because just when you were going through the book about dragons right now, it reminds me that dragons are such a celebration of the new year, especially for us during that. They have those dragon dances, and you guys also have like dragon boats. So many big things are based around dragons in a really great positive way versus, them being fires and destructive and stuff like that. So it reminds me of a different perspective on how I would think about dragons. So that's really awesome. But thank you so much for joining us today. And you guys who also joined us, if you would like to make a donation to Parent Child Plus to bring more books to low-income communities and just help out school-ready children in those communities. Hopefully, they will receive the Amy Wu series through this as well. Kat, did you have anything to say?
No, that was it. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here in support of Parent Child Plus. I think they're doing such important, essential work in the community. And yeah, I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Bye.
Bye.